What's going on Friday evening? No 49ers football today. May make some people happy given how that wasn't too pretty last night. But the bad news is that we have like 16 days at this point to pass before the regular season opener against the Chicago Bears. So the 49ers didn't look good against the Texans last night, but freaking out is wholly unproductive given the fact they sat 16 players. They sat as many players as we have days left until the regular season. We don't even know what exactly the fronts are going to look like for the 49ers, especially the offensive front against the Bears. And it was just the preseason. So everybody calm down. All this hand wringing about Trey Lance, all this hand wringing about the offensive line. We are in the same spot that we were entering the preseason, entering training camp. We know that the 49ers have a ton of talent. We know that they have a questionable offensive line that's going to make or break a lot of this football team's fortunes. And we know that they have a quarterback who's a total exciting wild card who really is going to have a big impact on their fortunes. And we have to see how that quarterback in Trey Lance develops. Nothing has changed since June, since early July. It's now what, August 26th? Yeah, nothing has changed as far as the prognostications for this 49ers team. And why? Well, because we weren't going to get the answers until actual football games started. The preseason and training camp weren't to get answers about how good the 49ers are going to be. Training camp and the preseason were about solving roster battles, which we're about to do here in a few days with the August 30th roster cut down. They're about getting the 49ers callous ready for this regular season. They were never going to be a referendum on if the 2022 49ers were a good team or not, or if the 2022 49ers offensive line was a good offensive line or not. That was not going to be solved this month. That's going to start next month. So people get it confused because they get this antsiness. They want to, start, answering the questions that we've had for months. But sorry, you're not going to actually get to answer those questions until the regular season begins. It's as simple as that. So with that in mind, August has been for developing our 53-man roster projection. So without further ado, the 53-man roster projection is here. I'm sure a lot of you have been following along on the spreadsheet. Well, Matt Barrows and I, we were like Lynch and Shanahan. We came together last night and, we haggled a little bit. We figured out what 53-man roster projection works for both of us. I'm happy to say that we are on the same cohesive page. And for those of you who want to take a look at it, it is in the chat section right now. The 53-man roster projection up on The Athletic. Now, none of this is breaking news. I think that we did our best to create a roster projection with informed analysis, talking to Kyle and John, talking to people around the 49ers organization, and obviously, probably most importantly, watching practice, seeing where guys were lined up, seeing whose stock was rising, seeing whose stock was falling. All of that work is now boiled down into our roster projection, which is up on the screen. So I will divulge some of it. Obviously, I would like you to go check it out, subscribe to The Athletic. It's a good time to do it, $1 a month just to get through to that article. There you go. Subscribe to The Athletic. Welcome to our 2022 49ers coverage. And obviously like this video and subscribe to this channel. But the roster projection opens up a lot of talking points, right? Because we're going to go through this entire 49ers roster. We're going to go through it in spreadsheet form as well, which you'll see right here. Make this one nice and wide for you. And as we do that, we can discuss where the 49ers have prioritized resources, where they may have skimped some resources, just their overarching team philosophy and how it relates to the 2022 construction of this squad can be discussed through the lens of the 53-man roster cut down. So it's going to be exciting times coming on Tuesday, not for the players who are getting cut, but for fans and for media and for, the guys who do make the team, because that means that you're one step closer toward the start of real games and the 2022 regular season. You can put this sucker up there. The preseason is over. Thank you. The preseason is done. And now we have this, what will be an interminable 2+ week wait while people argue about stupid stuff back and forth without having any formal data behind their arguments, because we haven't seen any action in the regular season yet. So we'll have to survive the marathon in the next couple of weeks, 16 days to be exact. But as soon as we're through that, it's going to be a whole lot of fun because the regular season will start September 11th at Chicago. All right, so to the roster. Back to this. Open it up. Let's take a look. Remember to go to the link. I'm going to put that down in the comment section and in the description for you to subscribe to The Athletic and that 53-man roster breakdown. But we can get going now talking about QB. Brock Purdy would take up quarterback 3, a third spot at quarterback if he makes this 53-man roster, which is why I think most mainstream prognosticators, based on what they've seen this training camp, don't have Purdy making it. As you can tell here, right side of the dividing line, I got to make this line bold. You're going to see me editing the spreadsheet in real time. Right side of this dividing line are players who did not make the 53-man roster in our projection. Left side of the line, players who did. So in the gold, you have players who made the cut. In the red, players who might be destined for the practice squad. Rookies are highlighted in blue. As you can see here, Purdy waived to the practice squad. That's the prediction. As far as quarterbacks go, Jimmy Garoppolo has been a point of discussion today. And there are a lot of bad takes online surrounding Jimmy Garoppolo and the 49ers' decision to carry him throughout the course of this offseason. Let's put this really simply. It did not disadvantage the 49ers in any tangible way to keep Jimmy Garoppolo on the roster from March until around right now. On August 30th, what was a sound business strategy for March until August will probably stop being a sound business strategy, because on August 30th, if Garoppolo does make the 53-man roster, all of a sudden there will be a cost, a tangible cost to that for the 49ers. Up until now, his money hasn't been guaranteed. They've shuffled money around if they needed to. There's just a completely stupid narrative going around online after the 49ers backup offensive lineman struggled the other day. And I get it. Aaron Banks didn't have a great game either. He's probably going to be a starter. But you go out and you saw, especially with McKivitz and School, God. But anyway, I digress. The offensive line didn't have a good game. We talked about this for hours last night, right? There is this narrative going around that says, oh, if only the 49ers had $24 or $25 million from releasing Garoppolo, they would have gone and spent on the offensive line. And guys, sorry to pull you away from your PlayStation. Sorry to pull you away from, your franchise mode on Madden. That's just not how it works with the 49ers. I mean, if you've actually paid attention to how they construct the franchise, they have a very specific list of traits that they want at every single position, especially when it comes to free agency. And they have different ways of building different parts of the roster with an overarching tendency. And the 49ers, face it or not, like it or not, you have to face this, are a homegrown team, especially up front. That's what Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch like to do up front. Yeah, they paid for Trent Williams because he's Trent Williams. He might be the greatest lineman of all time. But every other position along this 49ers offensive line, every other body there, homegrown talent. They made a decision a long time ago that they were going to go homegrown to this line because there are a lot of specific blocks that have to happen, especially within the context of Shanahan's outside zone scheme. And these specific blocks have to happen in unison with other linemen. They don't just like to bring in random veteran, plug and play like it's a video game. In a video game, that works. You get somebody that's rated 92, you plug him in and it works. The 49ers don't do that, and they weren't going to do that. So the fact that Garoppolo's money won't free up in all likelihood until August 30th or somewhere around then versus earlier in the offseason because of the shoulder surgery and because of the fact they decided to keep him throughout these entire several months, the fact that, that money, it's irrelevant. The 49ers wouldn't have spent that money on offensive linemen. That wasn't on their wish list. Their wish list included a top cornerback, Charvarius Ward. They paid him $13.5 million per year. They had enough money to do that. Why? Because the restructuring was really easy. As soon as they decided to keep Jimmy Garoppolo on the 53 or the 90-man roster for the offseason, they made the restructure, two of them actually, for Kittle and Armstead. They kept him. They realized they didn't owe him any money. They won't owe him the money until September 10th, but they owe him a roster spot starting on August 30th if he makes the 53-man roster. At that point, there becomes a downside to keeping Jimmy Garoppolo. Up until now, there hasn't been a downside. That's why we talk about a sound business decision. If there's no downside to do something and there's only potential upside, you're not guaranteed the upside, but say that you could invest in a stock that won't fall below what the money that you put in, then of course you're going to invest in it. If it could only grow and it won't drop, of course you're going to invest in it. Well, that was Jimmy Garoppolo this offseason. Maybe he became available on the trade market, or maybe demand did materialize on the trade market after the shoulder surgery. Maybe it wouldn't, but they were never going to lose value there. They were never going to be on some kind of different budget with Jimmy Garoppolo on the roster. No, that wasn't the case. They wouldn't have kept him if that was going to be the case. They didn't owe him the money. Whether or not the official savings came in March or later, as I expect on August 30th, had no bearing on how the 49ers decided to build their offensive line. Plus, can we just wait for the 49ers offensive line to actually, perform in the regular season before we go off on these tangents and we think we're smart with financial discussions about this team and what they should have done? We haven't even seen the 49ers play in this 2022 regular season. All right, so I digress. That's part of the QB discussion, though, because Garoppolo is one of the QBs currently on the 80-man roster. And I don't think it's going to happen for very long, because I don't even think that they have room for Brock Purdy on this roster. So you waive Purdy, bring him back to the practice squad. He doesn't take up a spot, and you move forward with that. All right, let's go back to the roster. Running back. What would everybody think of a Trey Sermon trade? I'm just tossing this out there. No real inside information aside from the fact that I see the logjam that the 49ers have at the running back position. And they've been talking really, really highly of Trey Sermon lately. John Lynch yesterday, Kyle Shanahan today. Mitchell's in. Jeff Wilson's in. Ty Davis-Price is in. I think they really want Hasty to be in. And sorry to all the Jordan Mason fans, but I think he's a great practice squad candidate. Hasty gives you a comparative advantage over everybody else here because he's different size, different skill set, more of a third down back, but he can also pass protect. I think in an ideal world, if somebody offers you something for Trey Sermon, you could solve this logjam, right? Somebody offers you a 5 for Trey Sermon, 5th round pick. Hasty makes the team. Mason's your practice squad guy. Or you could take 5 backs, but I highly doubt that. That's just something I'm tossing out there. It is congruent with the fact that Shanahan and Lynch have both been very complimentary of Trey Sermon. But I think the most realistic thing that will happen here is they keep Trey Sermon probably ahead of Hasty. Now, you have to remember there's still 16 days to go until the regular season. And because of that, somebody could still get hurt. You could still do an IR stash, right? And by that, I mean somebody minor injury, end of camp. You have them make the 53-man roster. You cut somebody else, but the person that you cut is not somebody like Sermon. You cut somebody who you don't have to waive, maybe somebody like Jeff Wilson, and run the sweetheart deal and tell him, hey, Jeff, re-sign with us the next day. We just have to stash this guy on IR so he's not out for the full season. So there's plenty of roster tricks that the 49ers can maneuver with, and they're probably going to have to use some of those this year, given how crowded this roster is. All right, on to receiver. Malik Turner stock is up. And this guy, Kyle Shanahan, today was talking about him being a professional, setting the right example in all facets of the game. Obviously, big-time special teams contributor. We saw him with big plays as the up man in both Minnesota and then yesterday in Houston. I think that you carry him as your 6th wide receiver, and if you don't do it, then you find a way for him to contribute. And you could do that, theoretically through the practice squad and call-ups from the practice squad. But there are limits to that. Malik Turner would be one of the players that, he's a veteran. He's a vested veteran, so he's not going to be exposed to waivers. He's the guy that you might be able to release on cut down day, bring aboard somebody who you put on IR immediately, and then you can re-sign Malik Turner because I think you really, really need that special teams prowess on this roster. Tight end. All of a sudden, I talked about this yesterday. What a development, right? Does the 49ers tight end position suddenly have depth? I think it's had depth all along, but they finally flexed it. If you look at the 49ers in the tight end room beyond George Kittle, Werner, good game yesterday. Dwelly, good game yesterday. Tyler Kroft, good game yesterday. Troy Fumagalli, good game yesterday. It's about the only position group I could say that, in all unanimity with. It wasn't a good game for most of the 49ers players yesterday, but for the tight end group, it was good. So did they carry 3? Did they carry 4? They sneak guys onto the practice squad. Tanner Hudson, signed the other day with the New York Giants after they released him. So there's clearly demand for 49ers tight ends. We'll see what they do at the position. And then here's, my overarching thought on the offensive line. Let the plan play out. The plan for the 49ers is obviously one centered around homegrown players. Aaron Banks, big-time homegrown player, second-round pick, right? Spencer Burford, fourth-round pick at the right guard position, had a bit of a rough go in pass protection against the Houston Texans. But Banks especially is such a hinge point for the 49ers at left guard. So much will be determined by how he either succeeds or how he fails. In fact, I think last year, the fact that Aaron Banks wasn't ready-made out of the box, even though, he might not have started last year right away, but if he would have been able to win a starting spot in 2021 as a rookie at some point, then Daniel Brunskill could have moved to the utility line position, right? Because Banks could have slotted in at right guard. Brunskill could have moved to utility line, and the 49ers could have done better than Colton McKivitz when Trent Williams suffered his high ankle sprain late in the season in Week 18. Now, they won that game in Week 18. That wasn't the high ankle sprain. That was some other sprain for Trent Williams. But then he suffered the high ankle sprain. He played on it in the NFC Championship game. That ended up essentially dooming the 49ers, right? Because Trent Williams gave up 5 or 6 pressures, way more pressures than he normally gives up. And the season ended. It ended because of shoddy pass protection last year. So they really, really could have used their hinge point hinging the right way last year. Aaron Banks wasn't ready yet, though. And now they really need him much worse in 2022 because Laken Tomlinson's gone. He's now with the New York Jets. So it's pressure cooker time for Aaron Banks. He has to be the cog in that 49ers machine at left guard, because even though you have Jason Poe taking some of his reps, we've talked about Poe. He's more of a specialty weapon at this point. If you want elite pass protection, you're going to have to get it from elite size. 49ers need elite pass protection at left guard, especially since right guard is still a question. Are these, is this a big laundry list of questions? Absolutely. Is that concerning? Absolutely. But can you wait and see, how the 49ers are actually going to look come opening day, especially since they haven't formally announced their starting lineup up front? Absolutely. You can do all of those things simultaneously. Now, I will say this. Good news for the 49ers was that Jake Brendel looked good against the Houston Texans. He's given up only 1 pressure so far this preseason. So no pressures. He's only given up 1 in 2 preseasons. 1 in 70 snaps last year for Jake Brendel, new 49ers center. None so far this year through 2 games of action in the preseason. All right, how about the defensive line? 11 bodies. Is it possible? It might take, one of those lower-end guys. It might take some special teams prowess, which the 49ers might not have, but they love strength in numbers at this position. Nobody in this 11 right here is hurt as of right now. Obviously, they lost Maurice Hurst to injured reserve earlier in the year. I'm not even going to put Hurst over here on the right because he's not eligible to return, but boy, they're deep up front. I said it yesterday, and I stand by it. Even without Bosa, Armstead, and Kinlaw, the 49ers defensive line would be better than a lot of other D lines in the league. On to linebacker, Demetrius Flanagan-Foles. I think he's locked down that number 5 spot. And I think when you look at guys like Marcelino McCrary-Ball and Seguna Olubi, you look at them as practice squad candidates. And finally, the defensive backfield. The Jimmy Ward roster trick. So Jimmy is going to be headed to injured reserve. But if you put somebody on injured reserve before the 53-man roster countdown, they have to be out for the whole season. So the 49ers have to figure out a way to carry Jimmy Ward, yet still open up a roster spot. So how you do that is that you include him as part of this initial 53-man roster, and you run the maneuver that I just mentioned. As soon as he's part of the 53, you move him to IR. That's minimum 4 weeks. That opens up another roster spot, and then you re-sign one of the players that you cut. So you have a backroom deal with players that you cut, and these guys make the 53, go on the IR, and then you bring back one of those players through re-signing. So the 49ers will almost certainly use that trick with Jimmy Ward. They could bring, somebody like Malik Turner aboard that way. They could also, there are a lot of possibilities, obviously. So I don't have to list every single one exhaustively, but the 49ers are going to have to operate tricks like this in this 2022 roster cut down. My main point after we've gone through all that is this. Why don't we just wait until the actual season to judge some of this stuff? Right now, we're projecting the roster. We'll analyze what the roster looks like. But as far as making overall sweeping judgments, the preseason is not it. The aftermath of the preseason is not it. Stay calm, stay factual, and wait for actual games to happen. And I think that will help people sift through some of the garbage that's floating around. Like this, the massive myth that the 49ers didn't invest money into their offensive line because they were committed to Garoppolo money. They're not committed to the Garoppolo money at all. They can move the money around. They already have. Jimmy Garoppolo, and that inflection point is coming on August 30th. It's more about the roster spot that Jimmy Garoppolo would take up and is taking up right now, but it's not as valuable with an 80-man limit. It's more about that spot than it is the money that he's being paid. All right, good stuff, guys. I am going to put this back up on the screen for you. I would very much like if you subscribed to our 53-man roster projection. We have the rationale for all the moves right there. 49ers 53-man projection predicting the fates of Trey Sermon, Jason Poe, and others. I'm going to put this in the chat section one more time. Go ahead and check it out. And enjoy. 49ers will not practice tomorrow, day off on Saturday. They'll be back at it on Sunday. So Sunday, I'm guessing Monday, cut down day is Tuesday, and then we kind of head into that Labor Day weekend so everybody can hopefully take a chill pill over that time, kind of get onto cruise control, and then we will hit the season opener on September 11th. All right, so there's the 53-man roster projection for you. Go ahead and click on that, check it out, subscribe to The Athletic, do all that good stuff. We will talk to you all very soon, and thanks for joining today. Have a good weekend, everybody, and have a drink on me. I'm not paying for it, though. Just have a drink.